Hello everyone, Gary and I are back with our usual updates. This is Wednesday, March 2, another beautiful day in Sonoma County. Do you mind if I expand on that?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So today, you probably all woke up with some dense fog here in the Northern Bay Area. Like always, folks, use the low beams when it's foggy out. Later this afternoon, we're going to see some sunshine. If you look outside, it should be nice, but don't count on it. It's not going to last long. Tomorrow, we got another low pressure system coming in. And folks, we get rain. We finally get some rain. Much needed rain, mostly throughout the Bay Area, not just the North Bay. And here's your 7-day forecast. That rain I mentioned runs through the weekend, but the weekend is not all lost. Suddenly you get the sunshine back. Next week, back to sunshine. Back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. That was extraordinary. So why don't we start off in this one with the same epidemiology as before. Sure. I feel like this is Conan O'Brien, and it's hard to repress the laughter. So our epidemiology, things are looking better, as you can see on the first slide with the Omicron variant. Things are coming down a lot, but if you notice, we're still above 5%. And so we still have quite a bit of 7-day prevalence with Omicron, and we're seeing cases in the hospital still, in the unit, intubated patients, again, still unvaccinated people, which is really, it's really too bad. It's a continued struggle. The next slide is our hospital data. You can see the hospital data is going down. It went to 6 to 7, it's now at 5%. So it's kind of undulating right now in the lower area. So it's going to be a continued push for public health measures and with vaccination to get underneath that 5%. When we see these levels drop to 1 to 2%, we really know we're in a great spot.
Good. Next slide, I just want to bring up some of the social changes that have occurred since we last met. That's some change in the mask mandates. It's kind of rippled across America, but California was one of the last ones to join in. So this slide talks about the areas where we're still required to wear masks, and that continues to be in the public transportation, airports, and like schools. And you'll notice that school mandate is extended only through March 11. After that, masks are not required in schools. And of course, healthcare settings, which is us, will still require a mask. And then down at the bottom, you can see areas that are strongly recommended, but no longer required. So that group is rapidly expanding. So getting back to a little bit of normalcy in that area.
Yeah, it feels much more normal, I think.
Yeah.
Gary.
So next I want to talk about, we know that Sonoma County is 80% vaccinated. The variance is in the younger age group. They're not as vaccinated as before. Right. So that's kind of the last frontier is dealing with the pediatric population. So where are we at? What's new with the pediatric population?
Yeah, the pediatric population is probably the more dynamic part of the pandemic right now, because we're trying to get vaccines to the younger and younger kids, as well as get them back into school, and do they wear masks or do they not wear masks? And as you just mentioned, the mandates are going to drop on March 11th. So I found this data. The CDC does a large conglomerate and collaborative study with serology, and there are 10 labs nationwide, from Washington to the East Coast to Wisconsin to California, and they collect serologic data, and the serologic data is by age group. And so there was a really good article in the Washington Post that summarized the CDC data. And the first slide shows that this is seroprevalence in kids, and you can see kids age up to 17 have almost a 58% seroprevalence coming through the Omicron wave. And as you can see, 65 and up have a lower prevalence. Because they're trying to take a lot of public health measures and not get exposed. And so we're protecting the 65-year-ups, but as you can see, there's a higher seroprevalence in younger people, which means that many children are getting infected subclinically, mildly infected, asymptomatically, and they don't have the opportunity for vaccination in the same time frame that we did. And so some of this is natural seroprevalence.
So they're actually leading the natural herd immunity costs.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a great way to say it, Gary, is that they actually have much more natural immunity to us. You still want to give them vaccine, because natural immunity is like getting 1 dose of a vaccine only. It gives you a third of the immunity that you need. And so you still want to give kids vaccinations, but they're a little bit ahead of us from the natural standpoint. Okay. The second slide here is just a representation of the first one. It kind of tells you where is the seroprevalence in these labs. The ones that are gray are the ones that don't participate, the states that don't participate in the CDC serosurveillance. But as you can see, like Wisconsin has a lot of children that have been tested positive by natural immunity. In other states on the moderate side, California is kind of in the middle of the road there. So I thought that was really interesting, because there was a recent article out, and I'll show it on the next slide, and I want to kind of point out a couple things. How is vaccine, and this one, the Pfizer vaccine, stacking up for kids? And it was looked at in a large study in New York, in kids 5 to 11 and in kids 12 to 17, a month later, or a little bit over a month after vaccination, how well did these kids' immunity do? Now this is not a peer-reviewed journal, so this is a preprint. So this has not been banged up by peer review, but it has been talked a lot about in the press. And I'm gonna just kind of highlight the middle of it where it says vaccine effectiveness. In kids, 2 weeks after full vaccination, 65% early on had protection against infection and 100% protection against hospitalization. And that's really a win. So you're not going to prevent every infection. Some kids are going to get subclinically infected. But if you wait 34 days or longer, then the protection against infection drops precipitously down to 12%. But the protection against infection drops down to 48%. What we realized in this study is that kids that are age 11 and younger don't get the same immunologic boost. Kids that are 12 to 17 get a better immunologic boost. So that's where this study kind of breaks down to say, are the 5 to 11-year-olds not getting the same boost to vaccination as the 12 to 17-year-olds? And that seems to be the case in this New York study, and the hypothesis is that the pediatric vaccine has 10 micrograms of antigen in it, where the teenage vaccine has 30 micrograms. So if you have 3 times the amount of vaccine antigen, you're going to get a better boost. That's kind of the leading hypothesis on why the 5 to 7-year-olds are still not getting.
And that observation is consistent with what we heard last time, and that is the vaccine approval for the 6-month, 5-year-olds did not go through because of their lack of immune response. So it seems like it's an age gradient. You just get a better response as you get older, complicated by the dose.
Yeah, we're trying to be safer. So in the 6-month-old, it's 1/10 of the dose, right?
Yeah.
In the 5 to 11-year-old, it's 1/3 of the dose, as opposed to teenagers. So we give a lower dose for safety, but we're sacrificing efficacy. And so we're trying to do the same thing for kids. Vaccine is still wonderfully effective to preventing hospitalization, and that's what you want. More than 1,000 children have died in the US from this virus. And so we want to prevent that, but do it safely in children.
And what's new on the variant front?
So on the variant front, I just want to put out there, we're kind of tracking this Omicron subvariant, where it's called BA.2. And I'll just highlight here, sotrovimab loses a little bit of its efficacy with the BA.2 variant. The good news is in California, it represents less than 4% of our isolates. So we're really not seeing this variant in California very much. And so we're still using sotrovimab. In the future, it may fall off the FDA recommendations if this becomes a predominant strain. We don't know if it will yet. It has in some countries, like in the UK, in Hong Kong, they're struggling with it as well. But in the US, especially California, our rates are very low.
Okay.
I do want to kind of give a shout out. Gary's wife, Allison, emailed me about a new subvariant coming out of Scotland, and I just want to point that out. This is called the Scottish variant. And I think Allison's right. You'll probably hear this coming. And so this is a little bit of our weak attempt at humor, because as we track the variants, we do find some variant in humor as well. So I was going to ask you, I know we talk a lot about the pandemic. I was going to ask you if we can go a little bit off topic.
Sure.
During this session. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you thought with, again, the news that's been flooded with the war in Ukraine and how that's kind of affecting your sense of being.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, isn't it? I think we all live in this environment where the major thing we've been talking about is COVID, and that's been the big pressure on us, and we could see the end of the tunnel, a ray of sunlight, and then this other thing comes on, and this war. It's the year 2022, and there's actually war occurring, which is kind of astonishing. But it's like, always waiting for the other shoe to drop, and this is like the 10th shoe.
Right.
It's very difficult. We just think we're getting somewhere, and we get squished down again. Just like last fall when the COVID rates had dropped down to a baseline, we thought we were there, and then Omicron came, and we had a spike that was magnitudes bigger than any previous spike. So how are you handling that?
Well, I think you said it really well. I knew that the springtime and the early summer was going to be this really quiet time in the pandemic, you know, and it was kind of fun because the Winter Olympics were on, and there was a little bit of good news out there, and then boom, this war hit. Personally, for me, it was like a kidney punch. It really kind of took the wind out of me, and I did with the news what I didn't do with Omicron. So I watched the literature, but I don't watch the news as much. But with the war in Ukraine, I was stuck to the TV, and it just made me feel even worse. And so I had to kind of back off and say, okay, what have I done to be healthier with the strain and the stress of the pandemic? And that's get on my bike, get better sleep, don't get glued to the TV, stay off the internet when it comes to kind of crazy news. And I've had to consciously do that more in order to kind of preserve some stuff, because I think we're all coming from an exhausted point of view, and even sometimes a depleted point of view. So that's been really tough. What about you?
I've really had to take my exposure to the war in a measured fashion. I find that if I follow it too much, it's overwhelming. Just feels like it's on top of my life here. If I don't follow it, and basically the other extreme is to live in denial, and that just seems too insular and too inhuman to ignore that something's happening out there. So I have to take it in small bites. And in terms of my personal care, I've been fairly good about keeping a routine, getting my running in, spending time with the family. I'm actually reading more than I have in years, that last 20 minutes before bedtime. Cranking through some books to get my mind settled down, to get some sleep. And it's another challenging level. This one's different because it just seems surreal, because life goes on here, right? And you see these photos, and it really just kind of hits you.
Yeah, I think it is really difficult, and I think one of the important things for me as an extrovert is to kind of keep connected. And so I've actually been reaching out more to friends to do things on a social setting, especially now that public health mandates are relaxing a little bit.
Yeah, and that is critical. I mean, and this is another time, and we've said this before, this is a time to talk to people, to share with people, and to look out for your peers, and to inquire how you doing. Just continue doing that. And you know, in that realm, I'm going to finish up with this. Our next all group meeting is Wednesday, March 16th. It's about 2 weeks away. We're going to meet in person. So talk about seeing your peers that you haven't seen for a full 2 years. In person, March 16th, we're going to be at our usual destination, the third floor of the Airway Building, Suite 310. So hope you'll all be there. It's going to be a very special evening.
It'll be really good to see everyone again.
Yeah. Thank you.